Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled, "Neighbor invited himself to my home when I was out of town and cooked himself dinner." I had a neighbor that for a long time I thought was a pretty okay guy. My kids are adults now, but when they were kids and he was a late teenager/college kid, he would babysit for me a lot. I was a single father and dealing with the balance of work and kids was so hard, so having a babysitter living next door was great. He ended up inheriting his parents' house and I did not really think much of him for many years after that. This is where the whole thing gets crazy and out of control when it comes to my neighbor. I am actually going to start when I first found out what he was doing, since I have no idea how long it was going on. I leave town for business a lot and I get back home to find the place just as I left it. One time though, I came home a day early and found that somebody had been in my house. When I got in, I could hear running and the back door slamming. I tried to run and see if I could spot anybody, but my attention was more focused on my kitchen. The stove was on the highest setting and all the things on the counter caught fire. It spread very quickly and I called for emergency services instead of trying and chasing after the crazy guy that broke into my house. The kitchen was destroyed and I had to spend a ton of money to get it redone and make it safe for use again. There was no sign of forced entry though, so the police thought that maybe I had left a window open or something. However, I hadn't, and the actions that were going on was clearly not of someone trying to rob me. I have never heard of a thief stopping to try and cook a meal in the house they break into. I would love to hear from anybody if that has happened to them. From the title, you already know that it was my neighbor, but I had no clue and was honestly a little bit scared of leaving again when my next business trip came up. I made sure all the windows were sealed and the doors were fully locked. I had also decided to install some cameras so that maybe, if the crazy guy came back, I would be able to prove that it was not just a typical break and enter thing. I was nervous the entire trip and constantly checking my phone to see if the cameras were picking anything up. Finally though, on the third day I was gone, my phone alerted me of motion and I tuned in to see what was going on. These cameras did not just record like in the old days, now they can live stream right to my phone. Anyway, when I saw the neighbor just walk in through my front door, I could not believe what was going on. I watched him for a while as he watched my TV, used my bathroom, the camera for that ended in the hallway, don't worry, and cook food using my kitchen. It just made no sense, but I was not too concerned about that in the moment. I called the police and told them that somebody was in my house and I was away on business. I could see on the camera that the police was coming in and catching him before he could run away again. I explained the situation to work and they let me leave and try to catch a plane back home so I could meet and speak with the police. The situation was made even more bizarre because the police said that he got into the house because he had a key. So they were unsure if he was actually breaking in or if he was house sitting for me. They could not get anything out of him because the officer told me that he was not making a lot of sense and suspected that he might have been on something. I tell him that he used to have those keys years ago when he watched my kids, and that is when I figured out that he made copies of my house keys all those years ago for who knows what reason. He is arrested and charged with trespassing and for the previous event that caused my kitchen to be burned down. This case though was a little bit of a mess for a couple different reasons, the main one being that the police were wrong about him being on something because he was still not making any sense. Instead of jail to wait, they had to take him to a psychiatric hospital for them to determine if he was mentally fit to even stand trial in the first place. This was a whole process that I was told involved having to contact old doctors, his family, etc. Until that happened, everything was at a complete standstill. It did not help that the fact of breaking into my house to cook a meal really did not make any sense to begin with. At the end, they decided that he is fit to at least stand trial for the trespassing and burning down my kitchen. Since there is so much evidence stacked against him, there is no point in him even trying to claim that he was not guilty. Instead of jail though, he was going to get to serve his time in the hospital so that he could be properly treated and cared for. He did not get away with it though, because while he is mentally ill, he knew exactly what he was doing when he broke into my house. That was the easy matter, because the harder one was going to be about the damage that was done to my kitchen and the money I had to spend to getting it fixed. All of this interaction was done between our lawyers, so I never actually saw the neighbor during any of this. They were trying to get me to drop it because it was an accident and nothing would have caught fire if he did not rush out so quickly. However, he should not have been in my house in the first place though, so the stove should not have even been on. It got a little frustrating because it was clear his lawyer was trying to get him out of this, so the case did not need to keep dragging on. My lawyer said that he was trying to make us feel guilty about his condition in hopes that I would drop the charges. He was aware of everything he was doing when he came into my house and started using my kitchen. My lawyer agreed that he had no defense because of that, and we went on with the lawsuit. In the end, I won the civil suit against him and he had to pay the $20,000 it cost to fix my kitchen from the fire damages. It sounds like a great ending, but actually I have not gotten a penny of that money. You can win money in a lawsuit, but if the other person does not have any to give you, then you are out of luck. It turns out the house was not in his name, but his sister's, so he could not be forced to sell it for money. He had no other assets and could not work now that he was in the hospital. I am still mostly happy because he is getting the help he needs and I can go on with my business without worrying about him hanging around in my house for no reason. The keys were obviously taken away from him, but I still have the cameras just in case when he gets out, he decides to go back to his old ways. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, that's definitely a first for me. A person breaking into your house only to use your kitchen and cook himself dinner. I've never heard of that before. Either way, if you enjoy my stories, then I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and maybe even like the video, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much in advance, your support is very much appreciated. The next one is titled, I Got Revenge on My Neighbor. So I have lived in a townhouse for the last 3 years. I live with my husband and 2 60-pound dogs. For a bit of background, I got attacked by a dog just before my neighbors moved in 2.5 years ago, which left me with a fear of strange animals up until recently when I was able to work through my trauma with my therapist. My neighbors have 4 loud and reactive dogs, 3 chihuahuas and 1 Australian shepherd, which charges the fence whenever they see someone on the other side and bark constantly. This had prevented me from using my backyard for the last 2 summers. Now that I have worked past the panic attacks and fear, I am spending a majority of weekends in my yard and let my dogs go back and forth freely from the yard. My dogs have been well socialized and don't have any interest in the fence when the other dogs are reacting. Up until yesterday, when the neighbors' dogs come out, I would bring my dogs inside, but it would still mean a minute or so for their dogs to calm down. I would let my dogs back outside to play when the neighbors go back in. This was no big deal for me. Now, cue Sunday. The neighbors let their dogs out, they react, I bring my dogs in. The same old routine. Except my neighbor curses me under her breath. Keep your effing mouth shut. This is not the first time they have been rude either. This gets under my skin considering her dog's reactivity is the reason I did not feel comfortable in my own backyard, and it is not my dogs who are reactive. Plus, I've always been the one to bring my dogs in, not the neighbor. So I have started to be a bit petty. Now when the neighbor let their dogs out, I stay out and play fetch with my dogs while her animals are going ape crap instead of bringing my dogs inside as I've always done. My dogs love it because they are getting more exercise than before, and it has only been 3 days and my neighbor is exasperated and has to chase her dogs around the garden. Side note, they have another dog on the opposite side of them, which they are equally reactive to as well. I got patio furniture being delivered tomorrow and I fully expect to enjoy my yard to the fullest this summer. After a week or two, I'll probably put up a visual blockade so her dogs cannot see mine to be nice, but I'm not going to restrict my well-trained animals for her untrained ones any longer. Don't appreciate my courtesy, I won't give it. Update: the neighbors decided to cuss me out and tell me to go inside last night. I said no, but put the dogs inside because the neighbors were being aggressive. They said our dogs should be able to be outside too, go inside. I said your dog's reactivity is not my problem and they are more than welcome to use your yard. The fact that they cannot stop charging the fence long enough to piss is your issue, and stood in the middle of my yard. They shouted at me to get the F inside and I told them, make me. A bit childish I know. One told to meet them out front. I said, no, if you want something from me, climb over this fence yourself. They yelled a bit more and I did not respond, and then they went inside after a minute. I think the neighbors have finally cracked a bit and it's only 1 week. Not proud and honestly don't want to deal with this nonsense, but I'm not going to bend to a bully. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, power to the OP, you should never bend to a bully. Props to him. And the next one is titled Only One Date with the HOA Lawyer, posted by user Unicorn Wants Weed on r/Ripe Stories. So this is a different kind of HOA story since it only involves a lawyer, but I think about it every time Ripe reads an HOA story. Also, this 1 hour lunch date was enough to warn me of HOAs for life. This took place about 25 years ago. Dating on the internet was the Wild West. There were no smartphones and digital cameras were expensive. You had to depend on honest descriptions for the most part. I had a listing on some dating site that no longer exists. I received a response from this guy, we emailed back and forth a bit with the usual questions, and it turns out we work in the same city, a block apart. I suggest we meet for coffee or take a walk during lunch. He says he'd rather get lunch at a place down the block. I let him know that I really could not afford lunch, I usually packed a lunch. His response was, don't worry, it should not be a problem. Okay, we make a date. Now remember how I said you depended on truthful descriptions? He told me he was 6 feet tall, 230 pounds, brown hair and blue eyes. He was not honest about height, he was shorter than me at 5'10". The weight may have been true, but I'm fairly sure it was short by 20 or 30 pounds. Now, I don't really care if he's shorter than me or heavier, I care that he lied. So, strike number 1. We meet on the square and he points out the restaurant a block down the street. As we start walking, I start talking. Nothing big, just small talk. His answers are just kind of grunts, and then he starts walking faster. I pick up the pace a bit to try and stay even, he walks faster. It's like he's trying to stay half a step ahead of me. Really? My co-workers were watching this from my building from the 17th floor, so we had a bird's eye view and said it was hilarious watching me catch up and him walking faster and faster. Strike number 2. We then get to the restaurant, sit down, talk some more, and I knew he was a lawyer, so I asked what type of law he practiced. He specialized in HOA law. At the time I did not really know what that entailed, so he explained it to me in a half-hour-long monologue. During this monologue our food arrived and we start eating. This guy keeps talking and eating, not bothering to swallow his food first. Strike number 3. I am eating though, so I don't leave and keep hoping it will get better. Now, I was very honest on my listing on the dating site, including the fact that I was divorced and had 2 small children. He finally decided to ask me a question. So, you have kids? Me, yes, I have 2 little girls. Him, I don't have any kids, never wanted any. My mouth just dropped open. Okay, message received, you're just looking for a booty call. Strike number 4. At this point I'm looking around the restaurant to see if there's anyone I know. I see some people from the accounting department across the way, thank goodness. The check comes and this guy whips out a calculator and tells me what I owe. I just stare at him, back and forth a bit because I told him I usually pack because I cannot afford to eat out much. He said he thought this would be okay since it was so cheap. I gave him my last $5 and told him that was all I had. Payday was the next day, but still. Strike 5 through 9 since I'd been planning to take my girls out for ice cream after dinner with that $5. I left by saying that I saw a coworker that I'd been trying to get a hold of and would talk to him later. Thankfully, my coworker was willing to escort me back to our building and I blocked his email. I don't have the writing skills to really express how condescending this guy was and how he would talk about the homeowners he sued, which was horrific. His big case at the moment was a guy who painted his garage door white instead of the approved off-white. I'm not kidding, and the way the lawyer talked about this homeowner, you would think the lawyer was the only thing standing in the way of total anarchy. Thankfully, I met my hubby on the same side a year later, and we will have been married 22 years in June, and he loves my girls to death. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta be honest, I kind of expected a different kind of story. I thought you were gonna marry the HOA lawyer or something. I guess fortunately or unfortunately the story took a different turn though, and I suppose you dodged a bullet there. And the next one was also posted on r/ripe stories by user Euraphelite or something close to that, and it is titled "My neighbor put a refrigerating chamber in his backyard." And yeah, Ripe Stars, let's hope this story is not about Dexter 2.0. Anyway, my mother and father bought this house in 1980. Soon, the two sides were also bought by two other families. After the year 2000, the house to the left was sold to the daughter of the couple to the right. They lived there for some years and then moved, but the house became the business of the family, first a tech distributor, and then they started to rent laser cosmetic equipment, the machines they used to laser wax. At this point, the oldest son of the couple to the right was running the business, renting from his sister. So far, the only problem was about our trees, but it was okay. I mean, almost. My father was with early signs of Alzheimer's and gave the guy some authorizations that we didn't know. At the end of the 2015, my father died, I moved back to my parents to help my mother, and everything was almost okay. The father of the guys to the right died, and the mother moved to a small apartment, and the oldest brother moved his business to that house. At first it was fine, but that is where the problem started. He illegally built a 2-floor extension to the house, so he was using this part and rented the front part to a lawyer. And the house to the left was divided in 3 units. First unit became a delivery restaurant, nothing against the guys, they installed filters and everything, so the smell would not be a problem with the neighbors. The second unit became another food service, selling frozen cheese breads, a specialty from our country, and the third was the problem. It was the second business from the older brother, and he was selling popsicles, aka ice cream on a stick. He first converted the back area into a refrigerating chamber. The only problem was the infiltration on the wall that frozen and cracked my garage wall. Those structures shared a wall. My garage was at the back of my properties and the cars were parked in the driveway at the front. I was not satisfied, so he built also a huge, ugly and noisy as hell refrigerating chamber in his backyard. We could hear the compressor working from inside our house with every window and door closed. Here in my city we have a law that says you cannot do any noise above 90 decibels from 8 hours to 18 o'clock and above 60 decibels from 18 o'clock to 8 am. His refrigerating chamber was doing 95 decibels continuously. That law is incredible but misinterpreted. You see, it's for commercial areas and we are in a residential area, and the law says you cannot disturb the quietness. Residential areas are for rest and not for noise, and in my city the older use dictates the area, so even if all properties around were commercial, we live here for 40+ years. So we went to the government and complained. 3 months of waiting and they went there to shut the chamber down. A hearing was scheduled, but COVID hit and we had to wait 2 years where they lost, and last week they sold the chamber. The business went down and the guy was afraid that we went too far with the complaints because he has a lot to hide. Taxes, illegal constructions, illegal employees, etc. In the end, we live in the middle of 2 houses that belong to the same guy. He is not a nice person, his parents were incredible, and he is the total opposite. I have a lot of stories about his wrongdoings, for example a bird cage with protected and illegal species, killing of protected trees and not meeting the city requirements of green areas in the property. And I gotta say, Ripe Stars, I'm kind of curious where this story took place. Judging by the laws in question and the way the story is written, I would say Germany, but it could also be wrong. However, I gotta say, I'm really glad that we didn't have a Dexter 2.0 situation on our hands here, because I really expected something different.